Good morning, everyone. It's Larry Holzberg, NAFA Secretary. We'll be getting started shortly. Just want to welcome everybody as you log in. Hope everybody had a great Memorial Day holiday weekend, and we'll get started promptly at noon. Good morning, everyone. It's Larry Holzberg, NAFA Secretary. I want to welcome everybody. We'll be starting promptly at noon. Hope everyone had a good and enjoyable Memorial Day weekend. We have a great program coming up for you today. We will be getting started promptly at noon. So stay tuned and look forward to enjoying the event. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. My name is Larry Holzberg. I'm your NAFA National Secretary. I'd like to welcome all of you back to our NAFA Town Hall Series, brought to you by our NAFA Board of Trustees. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our volunteers from the past 2 months that have been instrumental in helping us put some great virtual programming on for NAFA. We had a great NAFA National Impact Week last week, and we are looking forward to more exciting speakers for our continued town halls. Today, we'll be hearing an update from our NAFA CEO, Kevin Mayhew, and then we'll turn the program over to our special guest speaker today, Brian Dunham from Capital Group. Without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to our NAFA CEO, Kevin Mayhew.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. Thank you for joining us for our town hall today. We've had a great couple of months in NAFA as we continue to be nimble and navigate through this pandemic. And as the economy begins to get kicked up again and things start returning to at least a version of the new normal, it's good to know that we as your professional association can continue to provide you with great opportunities to connect, to learn, and to grow. And that's exactly what we've been doing in NAFA. Over the course of the past few weeks, we've put on a lot of activities. You can see on the screen right there, we've had town halls that have been going on for about the past 2.5 months. We had NAFA Nation Impact Week last week. What an incredible series of events last Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday as we gather to talk about diversity and the importance of being reflective in this industry of American society and how we can serve diverse markets. On Tuesday, the 19th, on Wednesday, the 20th, we heard from our government relations professionals and from about a dozen members of the United States Congress, again, about why your voice is important and why it should be heard on Capitol Hill and how they respect hearing from you all because you represent Main Street Americans from all across this country. And then again on Thursday, the 21st, we had an opportunity to talk about leadership and how you can become a better servant leader, how you can better become a leader in your home, in your community, in the work environment. And we heard from some great speakers, including a shark from Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary. Absolutely tremendous week. We had 5,000 people attend NAFA Nation Impact Week last week. So it was a great opportunity to make sure that members of NAFA and our guests that attended can have a great experience and can learn and grow and be better professionals. The week right before that, we had an incredible panel where we had the CEOs of ACLI, the American Council of Life Insurers, IRI, the Insured Retirement Institute, and SIFMA, which represents the entire securities industry, to talk about issues that are impacting the American economy, mainstream American consumers, and all that's going on in Washington, D.C. related to COVID-19. So great dialogue and discussion there. And you know, throughout those activities and the town halls we've been having throughout the past, again, 2.5 months, we have touched more than 15,000 people. We've had 15,000 folks register and attend those virtual events. Absolutely incredible to think that, you know, we as an organization did do a few of these things, you know, remotely as we did them through NAFA Live activities throughout the past 1.5 years. But to be able to have that sort of a reach and impact over the course of the past 2.5 months is absolutely incredible. Did want to give you a couple of plugs for some upcoming events. On June 4th, we have a members only webinar, which is leveraging social media to build connections. And that's with Sarah LeBlanc from LPL. The following Tuesday, June 9th, we have NAFA's Big Idea webinar, which is Beyond the Mask, How My Tragedy Sparked an Incredible Life with Brian Walsh. And then on June 11th, we have another NAFA Live activity, which is Developing Your Brand Identity, and that's going to be led by Brian Haney. So we've got great stuff. Hopefully you'll be able to connect and to join in and see it in the live version. But if you can't, what we've been doing with each of our activities is we've been recording them and archiving them so you can watch them on demand. And the activities from Impact Week, for those of you that weren't able to make it, will soon be available for you to also access on demand through our archive version. So again, thanks for all you're doing. We're going to get through this thing together, and your professional associate NAFA is going to emerge stronger and better than ever. Back to you, Larry.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. I'm very excited to introduce our speaker. And during the event, if you have any questions during the event and during his presentation, please use the Q&A box down below. That's where we'll be looking for questions, and time permitted, we'll answer all those questions later on. Brian Dunham is a regional wholesaler, senior manager at Capital Group, home of American Funds. He has 20 years of investment industry experience and has been with Capital Group for 18 years. Earlier in his career at Capital, he was a senior sales coach manager, responsible for managing the regional wholesalers and sales coach teams. And before that, the wholesaler covering Central and Southern Illinois. Prior to joining Capital, he was an investment representative with Edward Jones in Grapevine, Texas. He holds a bachelor's degree in theology from Anderson Theological Seminary, graduating summa cum laude. Brian is based in San Antonio. I'm very pleased to welcome Brian to the NAFA Nation.
Okay, there we go. Got the mute off. Thank you very much, Larry. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks to NAFA for having me here. I'm excited to be talking to this group today. And as you heard through the background, outside of just the regional wholesaling, managing a wholesaling team, I also have done some coaching. I do some communications training as well for our manager and senior manager North America team. And so today, what I thought I would do is not only deliver what I would typically kind of deliver, or a wholesaler might deliver in this environment, which is a market outlook, and then how to talk to clients about what's happening today. I thought I would do something in addition to that. What I would like to do is give you something that's a little bit more useful in addition to those things that you can carry on in an enduring way. What I mean by that is, having been an advisor, having been a wholesaler, and now doing the thing I do now, if you've decided to take the time to be here, I want to make sure you walk away with something you can use, and not just a talk track, but a way to speak. What I mean by that is what we'll go through here in just a minute, a conversation framework that we use at American Funds and have been using since 2008. If you've ever heard one of our presenters, oftentimes it's structured in this particular framework. It is not for any particular topic. You can use it with clients. You can use it with prospects. You could even use it with family members. I've done that. It's a simple conversation framework, but help keeps you on track. And what I'd like to do is, using that framework, present to you something we call keys to prevailing a market like this, and then also present to you our market outlook. So giving you the information I was planning on sharing, but essentially peeling back the hood, showing you the framework that underlies it, because I think you could find that useful and helpful, again, in an enduring way in your practice. So to begin, what I'm going to do is give you essentially an in-character presentation around what we called Keys to Prevailing in Market Decline, or a client conversations, challenging client conversations. So I'll step into that character and I'll show you the framework when we're done with this particular one. Okay, so don't need to do a show of hands in this environment. I'll simply ask a really basic question that I'm pretty sure most of you will answer yes to, and that is, how many of you have ever taken a flight? I would imagine most of us have. Not much lately, given what's happening with COVID, but when you think about getting on a plane, there's some things that are common to that experience, right? Hoping that your carry-on is gonna fit into the overhead baggage, or if you're sitting in an aisle seat, or if you're sitting close to the window, kind of hoping that if you're on Southwest anyway, hoping that nobody sits next to you, you might actually kind of lean over a little bit and create more of a presence so nobody sits there. Not that I've done that before, or just hoping that nobody purchased that seat if it's any other airline. Sometimes you see a young mother come on with a young baby that is not having a good day. And many times, while I will feel sorry for that person, at the same time, I think, oh, I hope they don't sit next to me. Right? These are common experiences we have on flights. They don't always happen though. There is something though that does happen every time. On every flight I have ever been on, domestic or international, and I would hazard a guess that it's happened on any flight you've ever been on too. And so now I'm going to kind of channel my best flight attendant voice and see if you recognize these words. We now request your full attention as the flight attendants demonstrate the safety features of this aircraft. When the seatbelt sign illuminates, you must fasten your seatbelt, insert the metal fittings into the other, and tighten by, you can probably finish the phrase, pulling the loose end of the strap. There's several emergency exits on this aircraft, and they're depending on the plane. There'll be some forward, some aft, and some over wing. Please take a few moments now to locate your nearest exit. In the event of decompression, an oxygen mask is going to fall from the ceiling. To start the flow of oxygen, pull the mask towards you, place it firmly over your nose and mouth, and secure the elastic band behind your head. And then they say, breathe normally. I don't know what normal breath sounds like if you've gone through a decompression at 30,000 feet. It's never happened to me. I'm quite sure that my breathing wouldn't be normal. And then there's the reminding that it's a non-smoking flight. There's tampering with, disabling, or destroying the smoke detectors located in the lavatories is prohibited by law, which seems weird that we even have to talk about doing that on a plane anymore, certainly domestically. And then they say this: you will find this and all other safety information in the card located in the, and you can finish that, I'm sure, seat back pocket in front of you. We strongly suggest you read it before taking off. This happens every single flight you take, and it happens before you get in the air. Most of the time it happens after you push back from the gate, and sometimes during taxi, but it happens every time. And why? Why do they do it when they do it? Well, they have your attention, at least more so than they would at decompression at 30,000 feet. Man, that's not the right time to have the safety card conversation when you're speaking to folks on a plane. So let me ask you this. Do you do that with your clients? Do you have a safety card conversation with them before they go on their investment flight? Do you let them know what to expect in the event of an emergency during their flight? Kudos to you if you do. It's a conversation that, when done on the front end, can be referred back to at times like now. If you haven't done it yet, we would encourage you to do so. And again, it's in times like now, it's a little more challenging to speak logically to individuals who are feeling very emotional about things. So let me present to you the American Funds version of a safety card. And Zach, if you don't mind sharing, thank you very much. So this, and it's located, I think as you came through registration, you can find these documents to download. So this is what we would refer to as the American Funds safety card. The first thing you want to do here, number one, simply just acknowledge that market fluctuation, that downturns not only can and do happen, but they're going to happen. The longer that you have an investment time horizon, you're going to experience a downturn. It's really important on the front end to help clients understand this is common, it's temporary. So if you could scroll down just a little bit, Zach, we'll get to the chart here. This chart will just show you over time the frequency and the depth of market declines. As you can see, that first column there, 5% or more about 3 times a year, 10% or more about once a year, and then 15 and 20, you can see what we've gone through recently is a relative anomaly as far as the frequency of it happening. Below it shows you the average length, that's peak to trough, and then the last time that occurred. So that's the first point. Let's just understand that market fluctuation happens, that downturns happen. If we go to the next bullet point there, Zach, that would be great. Perspective. So really trying to draw out a client's time horizon, because at times like this, emotions get involved. And when emotions get involved, it has a tendency to cause all of us to focus, to myopically focus on what's happening. We like to say oftentimes in emotional times, we find ourselves staring at our toes and not looking at the horizon. And so in moments like that, it's helpful to remind clients, hey, we're gonna keep a longer term perspective. And to do that, it's helpful to know that when the markets go down, they come back. And in fact, every single time the market has ever gone down, it has come back. And not only has come back, it's every single time it's gone on to set a new high, which is an interesting thought. If you think about that, you're investing. Every time the market's gone down, it's come back. And not only has it come back, and I say the market, I mean the S&P 500 here. Every time it's gone back, it has always, every time, gone on to set a new high. How on earth does anyone lose money in the market? Well, they sell when they're down, and usually those are emotional times. And so, encouraging your clients, don't make that same mistake. Don't sell when you're down, or don't put yourself in a position where you have to, which is a real problem for a lot of people. They get caught up in an equity market and overexposed and don't have short assets they might need over the short term and short-term investments. So if you scroll down just a little bit, let's get a better look at this chart. What this chart is showing you here is going back to August of 1929, so think Great Depression, and the market bottom there. And then it's looking at rolling 10-year period annual returns from that bottom. And you can see the peak up and then back down. And then September of 1964 to 74 is that next highlighted piece there on the bottom. And you can see again the move up and the move back down. And then you can see where we are today. This chart really just illustrates the cyclical nature of the markets. Markets go up, markets come down. Eventually what goes down won't go down forever and will come back up, but trees also don't grow to the sky. So this is a chart that you can use to help stretch out time horizons. And then if we can go to the next slide here, Zach. So then not trying to time the market, like helping them understand that when markets do go down, they have a tendency to come back. Oftentimes when a market comes back, that return happens as fast or faster than the decline does. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's a longer recovery. But what we've seen and what you see here with this particular chart, this is looking at the 5 biggest market declines since 1929. Across the top in the deep blue is each one of those declines. And then what you see there is for that 5-year period, what each year returned. Really the point we're trying to make here is that first year is the one that has the tendency to have the biggest return because you're coming off the bottom and you get that snap back. Unfortunately, many investors never get to experience that return because during the downturn, at some point, fear gives into panic, which gives into, I just need to get out of the market. And that's what winds up happening. And a lot of investors miss out on that. So the point here is just to say, if you can, stay invested. And if you can, invest more, right? This is the time to actually buy is when markets are going through a level of volatility that we haven't seen in a while, and not to try to exit the market. And then if we can move on here to the next one, Zach. So when we think about how do you have confidence and see opportunity in markets like this one, it's really in thinking about, it gives you the chance, it gives you the opportunity to evaluate your investments. If you're looking at your portfolios today and you're seeing everything going down, like your equities and your fixed income are both negative, that should be a warning sign. we like to say, in fact, Dexter Williams is our at our company coined the phrase, if all of your portfolio is moving in the same direction, whether that's up or whether that's down. In a good market, if it's all going up, or if in a bad market, it's all going down, you don't have a portfolio, you have a bet. You got a wager. And so markets like this one really help you evaluate, how are you doing when it comes to portfolio construction? How are you doing when it comes to diversification? And is your portfolio giving you what you're hoping it will give you in challenging times? You should be able to see that the bond side, the fixed income side of the portfolio is able to provide that airbag, essentially, or the seatbelt is what we often call it when it comes to equity markets, when equity markets have a challenging time period like this one. And then finally, this last little chart, just understanding that emotions can cloud your judgment. At American Funds, we strongly believe in investment advice, and we believe that our clients, our ultimate end users, are best served by having a financial advisor. Because at times like this, clients don't want to make investments. They're feeling really emotional about things, and this is the last thing they want to do. A client wants to invest when markets are going up. The chart here really tries to illustrate that, in the sense that if you ask the average investor, what is the formula for investment success? They're going to say, well, you should buy low and sell high. Right. What do you find investors doing, though? More often than not, investors buy somewhere closer to the top of the market. Things are going good. The economy looks great. Their friends are making money and investing. And it's like, okay, I'm going to put my money in. And usually somewhere around, if this were a clock and 12 o'clock was high, 6 o'clock was low, somewhere between 10 and 11 o'clock is when we look at market cycles in inflow of money. Somewhere in that 10 to 11 is the, if you're thinking about it in hours, is the hour where we see the most money coming in the door. And then guess when we see most of the outflows happen? Well, if you kick over the top of the market and you go into a decline, it starts with some investment concern, which then turns into actual fear, which turns into panic. And somewhere between 5 and 6, if you're thinking about it again in terms of a clock, is when we see most money outflowing in a market cycle, which is exactly the opposite. It's buying high and selling low. And is it any wonder that many investors have a poor experience in the market when that's the case? So we really believe a financial advisor, someone providing that advice to the client, holding their hand through markets like this, can make them, they're going to look back and say one of two things, I'm glad I did, or I wish I had. And your job as an advisor is to make sure that those clients can look back and say, gosh, I'm glad I did that, and live with discipline and not with regret. So that is the keys to prevailing market, or the American Funds safety card is what we call it. And again, this is a conversation you can have with clients. We'd recommend that you do it on the front end as you gain a client, as you're talking about investments, as you're talking about the market. Just help them understand, hey, look, markets go up, markets go down. Over the long term, we need to understand we're going to keep a longer term time frame. When these times happen, I'm going to refer you back to this piece. We're going to talk about it a little more and try to help you not get emotional about what's happening, and understand that we're trying to get you safely to your destination on time. So if we could switch to the 4-box. So this is the client conversation piece. What I just shared with you, that safety card story, is built around this particular conversation flow. And it starts with acknowledge, moves to perspective, goes to confidence, and then it lands on opportunity. And so when you think about this as a conversation flow, it's, for that last piece, it's just, hey, let's acknowledge that markets go up, markets go down. Let's maintain some perspective that we're investing for the long term. What goes down does come back up. Oftentimes it comes back up unexpectedly. And if we don't remain invested, or if we don't put investments in, we're not going to experience that if we've pulled out of the marketplace. And then the confidence piece is just, over the longer haul, what you see over 10-year periods in returns is pretty significant. It's typically very positive, and there's reason to have long-term confidence in the financial markets. And then the opportunity, where's the opportunity exists today? It's in recognizing that on that financial emotional clock, where's the right time to buy? We're certainly a lot closer. If you think about the percentage down, I think you'd look at it and say, okay, we're probably closer to 6 than we were 12 a couple of months ago. And which means it's a better opportunity to buy right now than it was and has been for a while. And so as we walk through this piece, I hit all 4 of those boxes. And again, I'll share with you, in some ways, I'm opening up the hood on how we think about constructing conversations that we have with you, that our wholesalers have with you, and that we try to have with our other clients. And that's just this, using this framework. And so almost every conversation that you'll hear, you won't ever see this 4 box typically. You have it now, but you won't ever really see it brought out in a presentation necessarily. But you'll hear, this is how our conversations go. This is how we coach people to answer questions. When someone asks a question, oftentimes we'll say, well, okay, let's acknowledge that. Let's acknowledge the situation that you just brought up. Let's share a little bit of perspective on that situation. Oftentimes that's historical perspective on the market or whatever. And then let's talk about what the reasons to have confidence are today, and does that create an opportunity? And whether we use the words acknowledge, perspective, confidence, or opportunity, we still follow this flow. I really felt like this framework could be helpful to you in your practice. So again, not just using it for the conversation we just walked through, but thinking about it from a broader perspective. Any client conversation you're going to have can follow this flow and framework. In my communications trainings that I've done, I found it very helpful for people to have some framework, whether it's this one or another. I think as you sit down to have conversations with people, it's really helpful to have a framework, whatever it is, to walk through. This is one we found a lot of value in, so hopefully you can too. What I would like to do now is share with you some of our market outlook, basically falling under these 4 headings. So you can see me utilize this framework again, but utilizing it in the sense of what's going on with the market, what are our thoughts there, how do we think about this thing playing out over the longer term. And so in the acknowledge box for the market, it's simply acknowledging that the speed and the magnitude of what we have seen of this decline is unprecedented. That's just it. We've never seen anything from the financial markets go down this fast, and with this kind of global impact. Never seen that before. And the driving force behind it, a global pandemic. We've never seen that before. We've had pandemics, but I think we'll all agree not to this scale. And so even though American Funds has 89 years of investment experience, most of our managers average 24 years of investment industry experience. And, when you think about that collectively, that usually, and even now, serves us really well when we think about how we evaluate markets, what's happening, and how do we make good investment decisions going forward. But I will tell you that the unprecedented nature of both of those things I just mentioned, the speed and the magnitude, and then the reasons for it, make it a really hard time period to evaluate in the context of history and in the context of other recessions, because this one's just so different. And we often say, and I've told advisors many times in my career, when you find yourself saying this time is different, that should be a warning flag. I still agree with that, because markets go down and markets come back. But in the same way, every time we have a decline, whether that was 2008 or whether that was this one, there's always a seemingly kind of a unique situation that drives it. There's some things that rhyme with history. They don't always repeat. History does rhyme. This one is just, in its global impact and effect, is just different. So it's harder for us to evaluate that in the context of history. However, it does not mean that there is not opportunities to find. And so to shed a little bit of perspective, so now I'm switching to the perspective box if you're following the screen. Volatility works both ways. Usually when we think volatility, we think that's downside. That's just down. And that's just not true. Volatility is the up and down of the market. And as you saw on the last page, typically after a significant decline, it's that first year following wherever the market bottomed out at that you see the biggest pop and the biggest return. And what we've seen here recently is markets have rebounded here in the United States. They seem to be gaining some level of stability and maybe a little bit of confidence as things start to reopen. Obviously, there's a lot of monitoring of the situation and what's going on. A lot of news about that every single day, of course, and the death toll and states opening up and how that might be impacting the spread of corona. But there is a level, I'm not saying things are back to normal, they clearly aren't. There's a level of normalcy though, to your life, to my life, much more so than there was 2 months ago. I have a little more certainty about what my day-to-day looks like. I know when I go certain places, I've got to have a mask on, I've got to have gloves on. I know that I'm going to help my daughter with her schoolwork. Thank gosh, that is over. That was really tough trying to be her math and Latin teacher. She didn't appreciate that either. And I just, you fall into this flow. Okay, this is what life is like now. And the market is no different. And market is made up of people like you and I. And as that confidence level at least begins to moderate and you kind of understand, okay, this is what it's going to be like, that's when you start to see markets stabilize. The great nemesis of the market is uncertainty. When uncertainty exists, that's when you're going to see volatility. And you saw it immediately here when the market started to go south. And it's like, we don't know how long, nobody knows how deep this is going to be. There's all this speculation. But once we start to get some data, things start to stabilize, confidence returns a little bit, and you see some stabilization of the markets, which is what we've seen recently. And then the last thing I'll share with you on the perspective box is just be really careful where you get your information from. What I mean by that is news media, whether that's television or whether that's print media or whether that's internet, it's really helpful to understand where their businesses, like any business, and a business is in business to grow revenue over time. You want to make revenue and you want to grow it over time. So if you think about the media, any media, so let's take the local Channel 5 News, the way that they make the majority of their revenue is off of advertising. Like they sell a 30-second commercial slot to Jim Bob's Pizza Place, and Jim Bob pays $5,000 for that to run on certain nights or some level of frequency. And that's how they make the majority of their revenues, just through advertising. And so if they're going to grow revenue over time, they've got to actually charge more for that space. And you ask yourself the question, well, how do you do that? How are you going to charge more for that same 30-second slot over time? Well, an easy answer to that and example is the Super Bowl. Highest rated show in the US every single year running. And it's somewhere around $4 million last year for a 30-second slot. I mean, what company in their right mind would pay $4 million for 30 seconds of advertising? But they do. And that's a big topic of conversation. That's the only TV game in all year long in my house that I actually turn it up when the commercials come on. They're some of the most creative commercials that you'll ever see. Companies put a lot of effort into it. Well, why? Why are they willing to pay so much, and why do they direct so much of their focus there? Well, you know the answer. It's because so many people are watching the game. That's why they can charge so much. So boil that all the way back down to my Channel 5 News space. If I have 10,000 people seeing that slot last year, but now it's 40,000, I'm going to go back to Jim Bob's Pizza and I'm going to say, I need four times what you're paying me last year. There's more eyeballs watching it. So when you consider that, you have to know that in addition to reporting the news, they are also needing viewers and needing to increase their viewer count or their reader count. And so then you ask yourself the question, well, how do they do that? Well, it's provoking, how us humans have a tendency to respond to things. It's either we really want something or we're really afraid of something. And so it's provoking that response to get you to watch the show, to, whatever. Have you ever watched a show where they say, hey, big news happening on Capitol Hill. We'll get to it after the break. Right. And then you're like, oh man, I want to see this. And you wait through the commercial break. And when they come back on, they share the news. And you're like, well, that was no big deal at all. That's called a hook. They're trying to keep your eyes tracking over that advertisement. And as well, the words that are used. And this is my point for this space here. It's a longer story, but it'll help you understand the point, which is this. Take a guess. The two most common words used to describe the movements of a market by the media, to the two most common words. They are soar and plunge. Soar and plunge. Now, maybe you've noticed them, maybe you haven't. I promise now that I've told you what they are, you're going to see them everywhere. Soar and plunge. Now, if you don't think those words, and they're meant to have an emotional reaction on you, on me, on the clients, ultimately to get us to read the paper, buy the paper, dial in, watch the show, pull up the website. If you don't think those words have an emotional reaction on you, the next time you're on vacation and you want to go up to your hotel room and you walk over to the bank of elevators along the wall, and instead of those elevator buttons saying up or down, they say soar or plunge. Are you going to get on that elevator? Probably not. Again, I'm not saying don't be informed. I'm just saying don't get your investment advice from a journalist, and help your clients understand that too. That when they have serious questions, they should come talk to you, because you can help them, again, expand those time horizons, dial down the emotion, and make appropriate decisions in times like now. So when it comes to confidence, when you think about why should we have confidence today, well, when you look back at it, prior to COVID, the economy was in a pretty healthy state. The industrial sector was doing quite well. Falling interest rates had really provided a bit of a stimulus to the housing market, which had really picked back up again, and the auto market. Both of those sectors typically are not late cycle performers, and they started to be. The labor market was really strong. And then we have this catalyst that has caused people to stop traveling. I mean, you don't have to look far. If you just look at the oil market, when you see the impacts to that market, given also the Saudi-Russian thing happening, but when people just stop traveling, and the global impact of that is so significant. Same thing with all of our economies. People are at home, they're not traveling, they're not driving as much, they're not buying as much, they're not doing as many things that drive our economy. And so what governments are doing around the world is trying to prop those economies up in this interim period, thinking that if we can get through this virus in a quick enough time, during that time, if we can prop up the economy through stimulus package, CARES Act here, and some other things to prevent permanent damage to consumer behavior and employment, that we'd be okay. And that's what the stimulus is there to do. What is interesting is you hear a lot of people say, well, is this going to be a W or a V recovery or a U-shaped recovery? And I don't know that we have an opinion on that. I do think, though, we feel like the trajectory of this recovery will be the path of the virus itself. Meaning, as the virus begins to dissipate, as we start to see better testing come out, potentially vaccines, as the virus is contained and hopefully eventually is not presenting the problem that it's presenting presently, that's when you'll start to see the recovery taking place. What is interesting is Rob Lovelace, who's been with us 30 years, he a money manager and grandson of our founder, when he was talking about this, he said, in 2008 and 2009, there was so much uncertainty. We didn't know how deep things went. We didn't know how far we were going to fall. There's so much that we didn't know, and we didn't know how it's all going to work out with the housing. We had no clue how this was all going to shake out. He said, today's is so different, because understanding where our economy was and knowing, absent the coronavirus, where we expected things to go, I feel like I know what the other side of the valley looks like. I don't know how far the valley goes down, and I don't know how rough it is on the valley floor. There'll be some roughness, but I do feel like I know what it looks like on the other side of the valley. And he said, and I've never really had that before in my investing. And so it takes us to think about things from an investing standpoint. It gives us a lot of confidence when we're thinking about where we're going to place money. And so that leads me to the opportunity. And so to us, high quality growth companies are places to be looking. If you just look at Growth Fund of America, for instance, which is our oldest and largest growth fund, if you look at some of its very top holdings. So ask yourself this question: Netflix. Do you think Netflix is being used more or less than it was before COVID? So you can answer that question. What about Amazon? More or less before? What about Facebook? More or less before? And when you now start thinking about cloud computing, and think about all of us that are doing virtual video meetings these days, and all of the backbone that requires to maintain, because that's not going to change. I mean, companies, I think, look around and they say, gosh, our workforces are working from home. It's cheaper, more efficient. We should probably at least keep them working from home for a period of time, even after things, quote unquote, return to normal. Like, as we think about this, we should be thinking about how society is going to change. Like 9/11, different example, but when 9/11 happened, travel changed. In our country, we changed forever. Things that are still in place today that weren't in place before that. We really feel like this is the same thing in a different aspect completely, but that there will be things that result from this that don't ever go back to the way they were before. Some of that is how we work as a country. And when you think about the businesses and things that are required to support that, a lot of those are growth companies. And we can find the ones that are high quality, like some of the ones I mentioned. You can see some good success. And I think we've seen that in Growth Fund of America's results so far this year. It's an investment that I would encourage you to look at when it comes to domestic equity. Again, the largest and oldest growth fund that we have on the books, been around since 1973. So I hope you heard throughout that kind of market commentary this 4-box framework and how it provides a flow to a conversation. And I hope you took some good notes from how we're thinking about the marketplace and how things have gone so far. And I guess, there's one other thing that I had to share with you around just interpersonal communication. And so I'm going to do that very quickly. And if there's a question about, I can go into more detail when we get to the Q&A. And if there's a question on this, I'm really happy to expand upon it. It's something that, this is kind of my bread and butter when it comes to stuff I do at Capital around communication. So I'm going to ask you to write down 3 words: visual, vocal, and verbal. Visual, vocal, and verbal. In any interpersonal communication, almost always, your primary goal is to build trust. You want the other person to trust what you're saying, or to build a relationship with someone, which begins on trust. And there's been a number of communication studies that are done, particularly Albert Abramian, who is from UCLA, professor of communications, has done a study and repeated it to try to determine in a face-to-face communication, right? I have certain ways I can communicate with you. I've got visual, which is everything going on that you can see. Sometimes it's, if I had a flip chart or even the slides that you're looking at here, that's visual. And then there's vocal, which is the pitch, pace, and power of my voice. Sometimes I want to talk really fast. I might slow down in certain points, or I may even pause to highlight something. So the pitch, pace, and power of my voice, that is what vocal is. Then verbal is the words themselves, like the words I'm choosing to use. So just ask yourself, play a little game here. Look at those 3 words, visual, vocal, and verbal, and ask yourself, which is the most important? In a face-to-face communication, what is the most important? Is it the visual? Is it the vocal? Or is it the words themselves? Is it the verbal? And what this study has done is to try to determine that. And what they've determined is that, for those of you that said visual is most important, you would be correct. Visual is 55% of interpersonal communication. More than half of what you say has little to do with what's actually coming out of your mouth. It has more to do with how you're interacting with someone visually. And then vocally is 38%. 55 visual, 38 is vocal. The way you're saying, using your voice to say words, which is interesting because it leaves, for the math majors in the room, only 7% for verbal, for words. And just ask yourself the question, when you prepare a presentation, where do you spend most of your time? Well, almost always it's on the words, right? We script it out. This is what I'm going to say. This is how I'm going to say it. But the reality is most of that message is being delivered outside of the words themselves. Now, these 3 things don't exist in silos, meaning I couldn't get on this WebEx today and not say a word and just use my hands and expect you to get more than half the message, right? That's not going to work. What the study says is when these 3 things are congruent, when they're aligned, when visual, vocal, and verbal is aligned, that's when trust is built. And so what I would encourage you to do is you think about, presenting to clients or having conversations with them. Don't just think about what you're going to say. Think very deeply and practice how you're going to say it to make sure that they're receiving it the way you want them to and that trust is built. A simple example of this is, let's say that Larry and I are having a conversation, and for whatever reason, let's say Larry hears that I said something bad about him. So Larry says, "Hey, Brian, can I talk to you real quick?" And I say, "Sure." And he says, "Hey, Brian, do you have a problem with me?" And if my reaction is, no, Larry, I don't have a problem with you. Not at all. what are my words saying? Well, my words are saying, no, I don't have a problem with you. What am I saying? Simple example, but my body is communicating, I got a big, big problem here, right? And that's a that's a super basic example to show you what your brain does. Like your brain will pick up on much more subtle things. Have you ever talked to somebody that you thought at the end of that conversation, I like what they said, but no, just something about them, I don't know. I just don't really trust that they believe what they said. It's because your brain is kind of thin slicing the visual and the verbal that weren't aligning with what was coming out of their mouth. So in the instance with Larry, again, let's just say that my body language does align and I lean forward, I open up, but my verbal's off. No, I don't. Why would you say that? Right. And clearly your brain's like, okay, something's wrong. Or if I were to say, no, Larry, what? Like, no, where did you hear that? Now, because everything is congruent, it's believable or more believable than it was. So I guess what I'm trying to share with you is if you feel like your messaging could use some cleanup, one of the ways to practice that is visual and verbal, understanding how important they are in a face-to-face interaction. And just two more numbers, 84 and 16. 84 and 16. This is if you eliminated visual, like if you're just over the phone. So you're just talking over the phone. 84% of that is vocal tone, pitch, pace, and power. 16% is the words themselves. So the words more than double in the just the phone situation, but still the way you say what you say is the most important. So hopefully the framework for the conversation, at least those last little bits as you think about creating conversations and having better conversations with clients, hopefully that is helpful to you. And I'll pause there and just see what questions we have. I'd love to take, we have a little bit of time anyway for questions. I'd love to take any that you guys have.
Thanks very much, Brian. Not that many questions, but two quick ones. One was one of our participant listeners, Steve Caldera, asked about the Fullerton article, one of the great pieces he saw. Can you mention that? Do you know about that article that you guys put out?
Oh man, so I guess we re-put that out recently, I would guess. I saw it so long ago though. It's probably been 5 or 6 years. I am familiar with it.
So he mentioned it was a great piece. Maybe we can link it to everybody. The other one is touching on your visual, vocal, verbal. Jeremy O'Brien, how would you present visual in Zoom meetings with clients?
Yes. So I think very similar to what, at least what I'm doing here now with you. So Zoom over video, it's thinking about trying to make sure that your body language is backing up your words themselves, or using your screen share. I mean, this is visual too, right? What you're seeing here in the 4-box is visual, and being able to refer to that. I would say that, in some of the coaching that we've done with our wholesalers, sometimes when they get on a video, they have so in person, a lot of times they're fairly charismatic when they're in person, and they have hand gestures and a lot of good eye contact and all of those things. But when they get on video, for some reason, they feel like they have to stay in a box, and it tones down their communication style. I would just say, just be wary of that, because that can happen. Just try to have an interaction like you're sitting across the desk from someone. I wind up looking in the camera a lot because all of your eyes are going to be there if you're looking at me. But I try to, even in this presentation, I try to envision myself in a larger room. And obviously I can't move side to side or pace a platform like I might in a typical presentation, but you can still hopefully feel a lot of the visual pieces that I'm trying to include, not just this, but mostly, highlighting things with either hands, face, body gesture, or whatever. Hopefully that helps.
Another question, there's talk of becoming more of a sector investor now, such as health stocks up, travel stocks down. How would you respond to that? And the person asking the question, Tom Michael's a big fan of American funds.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. Yeah, so absolutely. When you look at the sectors that are benefiting from what's happening, healthcare is right there at the top and travel is right at the bottom. And, from the travel industry, it's a challenge on a number of fronts. And even though people, I think, or at least in the US, seem to be getting maybe more fed up with being inside and not doing as much travel, I still think that's an industry that it's a lot of the travel industry anyway operated on thin margins. And when you're going to go the better part of a year globally with very little traffic. I think of a cruise line or whatever, resorts, you're gonna have a number of months where you don't make money, and that can extend itself from a health of a business standpoint. We pay a lot of attention to that. Like if your margins are thin and this is really causing a slowdown or a drop off the cliff in your business, then that's it. Those are areas we prefer not to be invested in. Versus healthcare is something we've always really thought a lot about, and certainly when it comes to this particular crisis, I mean, it's gotten a big boon. So yeah, I think when we look at sectors that are positive, healthcare is right there at the top, and there are others that we consider and think about that will continue to do, pretty well. Like technology is what I mentioned before. That's another area that has weathered this storm quite well, and you can understand why when you think about what's happening for those firms right now is a dramatic increase in a lot of their traffic, a dramatic increase of their business. And typically tech is something that's pretty volatile when we go through a downturn. And this one is, it's what's sustaining society right now is technology. And so we see a lot of value in holdings there. And then it becomes, as those continue to do well, you expect those to continue to run for a little while as the duration of this runs. And who knows? I've heard estimates that, maybe by the third quarter, we start to see some mildly positive. I mean, I think it's really optimistic, but one of our more optimistic analysts thought perhaps by the third quarter, we'd start to see some positive GDP numbers. I do know that there's a strong sense that 2021, certainly by 2022, as we kind of adjust to what life is like, and the virus piece becomes less of a prominent daily issue for us, that we should see a return to a pretty good market. Again, thinking about that, knowing what the other side of the valley looks like.
Time for the last question, and it's an easy one, I guess. Is there a short presentation you could share with the ICA guide that we printed that we can send?
Sure. Yes. So in the ICA guide, there is, and I don't know, Zach, I know I told you I wasn't going to share that, but I don't know if you have it anywhere nearby that you could share. There is something referred to as Louis the Loser, and it's, I don't know. It's on the back. I think it's on the back side of the mountain chart, like in the middle. So you open up the big mountain chart and you fold it back up. Somewhere either right on the back side of that very next page is Louis the Loser. This is a favorite story of mine. Oh, great. So if you could just start scrolling through this, you're going to go through several pages. This is the Bible for, at least at American Funds. This is our Bible when we talk about basic investing. And each one of these are fantastic stories. I would encourage you to reach out to your internal wholesaler if you haven't walked through this guide before. This one is just a particular favorite of mine because I think it allows you as an advisor to show a level of perspective if you just know it. Okay, so let's stop. Stop right here. Okay, so here's the story in what you're looking at, and then I'll tell you how I would share it if it were me. So the story here is this Louis the Loser, right? He misses planes, he catches colds. Like Louis can't do anything right. And the idea here is that he invests $10,000 in ICA on the very worst day every single year for 20 years running, meaning he invested the peak of the market every year for 20 years running. And you'll see down at the bottom, had you done that, your total $200,000 investment, and it's down on the left-hand side, becomes or grows to $417,000. And then the best day, like this is Louis's brother who does everything right, Perfect Pete, right? He invests in the market low every single year for 20 years running. And you can see that 200,000 turns into 520, which is a measurable, meaningful difference, but not as much as you might expect. So that's the layout of this chart. Let me tell you how I would share it, because I don't know that I mean, using the chart's pretty cool, but it gives away the punchline. So how I would share it would be, I used to tell at investor meetings all the time, I would say, okay, Mr. Investor, Mr. Advisor over here is the best advisor in town. I'm the worst. Here's what makes him the best. He knows when to invest the money. Let's say that your great uncle left you $200,000 and he portioned it out to you once a year, January 1st, you get a new $10,000. You decide, you know what? I don't need that money. I'm going to take it to my advisor. You take it to the advisor here and you just say, you know what? You know what to do. I'm going to give you the $10,000 January 1st. You invest whenever you want. And he, being the great advisor he is, picks the market low every year to invest your money. The best possible day he could have done it. You couldn't have done any better than what he did. What do you think after 20 years that $200,000 is worth? And when you ask people that question, they go, $5 million, $35 million. And you say, well, yeah, it was positive, not quite that positive, but actually it more than doubled to $520,000 in great return, right? And they say, yeah, okay, that's good. So, okay, but I'm the worst advisor in town. What makes me the worst is same scenario, same uncle, same 10,000, but you picked me instead. Too bad for you, because you brought me that 10,000 January 1st. You said, do whatever you want with it. And I said, okay. And I invested whatever day I wanted, the best day I thought, but I happened to pick the market high every year, 20 years ago. The worst, you couldn't have done worse. Right? That's the story. And so what do you think the 200,000 is worth? And clients repeatedly would say $50,000, $10,000, zero, like you lost all of it. And when you say, actually, you did okay, you made $417,000. And people are like, whoa, wow, I didn't, really? You more than doubled? Yeah. And so the point here is this. Both of these scenarios are impossible. You will not pick the best day 20 years in a row to invest your money. You're not going to do it. I don't care who you are. But you're also not going to pick the worst. You're not going to invest the worst day 20 years in a row to invest your money. So the reality is both of these situations are pretty much impossible. So your return is going to be somewhere between those two numbers. Just picking a random day. It'll be somewhere in there. And if that's okay with you, why are you sitting around wondering, was today a good day to invest? Is tomorrow a good day to invest? If your money is longer term money, the time to invest is when you have it available, hands down. So that's one story off of this that I have gotten great traction with. Again, if you just know the numbers, 10,000, get the story down, 10,000 a year, worst day, best day, it's 200,000 invested. What did it turn into? And then ask somebody, ask them to tell you, what do you think it's worth? You'll be surprised at what you hear. It'll be funny, but you can make the point. They're both impossible. Your return's going to be somewhere in between. If that's okay with you. And that's something I would use to just help people understand that it's time, not timing, which is what the point of this particular story is. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. That was great. Brian, I want to thank you so much for doing this for us. I think people come away with a lot of ideas, knowledge, and stuff they can implement immediately. To my friends from NAFA, we want to thank you for being here today, and have a great weekend, and everyone stay well. And we will see you at our next event. Take care. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day.